Hey everyone, today we're going to look at a secret line against the Caro-Kann Defence that completely crushes it in one of the most popular setups. But first, let's talk about why we should even use this hidden sideline instead of sticking to the main lines like the advance variation or knight to c3. The problem is, players who choose the Caro-Kann have studied those main lines inside out. They play them again and again, so it's tough to surprise them. And therefore, players who choose the Caro-Kann Defence usually have far more experience than you do. It's also difficult to create strong attacking chances in the main lines of the Caro-Kann Defence. If you play into the typical exchanges, it often leads to a quiet and rather dull position, one that your opponent is usually more familiar with. Of course, there are some aggressive options, like the so-called alien gambit, but since it has become quite popular recently, more and more Caro-Kann players know the correct defensive ideas. And objectively, that line gives white a clear disadvantage, about -2 according to modern evaluation. So instead, we're going to take a different path with bishop to d3, a very tricky and less explored sideline. I've prepared something really special for you in this variation. Against bishop to d3, there are two main replies you'll face most often. 1. Pawn takes e4, which is the most natural and common move. 2. Knight to f6, the second most popular choice. Let's start by looking at knight to f6, and then we'll return to the pawn capture later, because this line gives white a lot of fun attacking possibilities. Now, when black plays knight to f6, it's actually a slight mistake in direction. You can immediately push your pawn to e5, attacking the knight and forcing it to move. The knight has no good forward squares and must retreat. If black tries to stay active with knight to e4, you can play pawn to f3, and suddenly the knight is trapped. All its escape squares are controlled by your pawns and pieces. Therefore, the knight will be lost. To avoid this, black usually retreats the knight to d7, but that move gives you a powerful tactical idea. You can now advance your pawn to e6, offering it as a sacrifice. If black captures it, you'll open lines and create immediate attacking chances. If they don't, you can capture something yourself and gain a strong initiative. And if black accepts your pawn sacrifice, they walk directly into your main trap. You immediately play queen to h5 check, and suddenly their position collapses. They have only one reasonable move, pawn to g6, to block the check. But then you simply capture with queen takes g6. Of course, you could also capture with the bishop, but let's be honest, it's not every day you can deliver checkmate with your bishop in just 8 moves. After pawn takes c4, we simply recapture. The majority of black players will then play knight to f6, which looks completely natural since they're trying to develop with tempo by attacking your e4 bishop. However, instead of retreating the attacked pawn or piece, as most players do, we surprise them with a rare move, knight to c3. This simple move calmly defends the bishop on e4 and keeps our central control intact. At this point, black will often decide to trade on e4. You recapture naturally, and although the position is objectively equal according to engines, there's a very important practical point. It's actually quite difficult for black to find the correct plan here over the board. Usually, they'll continue with bishop to f5, the typical Caro-Kann development move, because bishop to g4 isn't possible. You would simply capture it. So bishop to f5 is their standard idea, trying to gain another tempo by attacking your queen. Up to this point, everything may seem perfectly fine for black. They've developed smoothly and appear comfortable, but here's where we cleverly pull them out of their familiar territory. Notice that in this position, before black played bishop to f5, there was no knight on f6. That means the typical Caro-Kann setup, the classical or Tartakower variation, is no longer possible. Without that knight, black can't follow the usual development patterns they know so well. Instead, they're forced into this unfamiliar line with bishop to f5, which is actually much trickier to handle than it looks. Now, we continue with knight to g3, attacking the bishop. Black will almost always retreat the bishop, usually back to g6. Then we calmly develop with knight to f3, reinforcing the center and preparing for kingside play. And this is the critical moment of the game, the moment of truth. From here, black has essentially only one correct move that keeps the position balanced. Any other move they play will likely lead to a quick and devastating attack for white. I'll reveal that correct defensive move in just a moment, but even that doesn't refute our idea. It merely leads to an equal position. And remember, in chess, equal doesn't mean drawn. It just means your opponent can survive if they play perfectly. Now, what do most players actually do here? They usually play pawn to e6, which seems totally natural. It opens the way for their bishop on f8 and prepares to castle kingside. But here comes the fun part, and my bold promise to you. If you reach this position, you have an excellent chance to win the game. Here's the plan. Instead of castling or playing something slow, you immediately strike with pawn to h4, threatening h5. This move is incredibly annoying for black because h5 would chase away their bishop on g6, already short on squares, and open up dangerous attacking lines against their king. From here, your pawn on h4 is ready to push forward and tear open black's king side. Naturally, black will want to stop this. The most common move, and the correct one, is pawn to h6, giving the bishop on g6 an escape square. If instead black tries pawn to h5 with a similar idea, that actually backfires. You immediately jump in with knight to e5, attacking the bishop. The bishop can't safely move because the h5 pawn becomes weak and will soon fall, leaving their king side in ruins. So, h5 is a serious mistake. Let's go back to the main line. After pawn to h6, we continue with knight to e5, activating our knight and threatening to capture on g6, which would double black's pawns and expose the king. To avoid that, black usually retreats the bishop to h7. Now comes queen to h5, a move that looks like a scholar's mate, but this time it's a real and dangerous attack. You're threatening to take the h6 pawn, and black is in trouble. Their most common defense is queen to f6, though some players try pawn to g6 or queen to c7, but all of these lines still favor you. Against queen to f6, we hit them with a stunning move, bishop to g5. This is a brilliant bishop sacrifice that completely shocks opponents. After they capture, the position opens up, and their queen suddenly becomes trapped or nearly so, with no safe squares and your attack raging on. The black queen must keep defending f7, or it falls to queen takes f7. If they play queen to f4, the usual move, you strike with rook to h4, and suddenly their queen is trapped in the center. A completely unexpected idea that can even catch grandmasters. Stockfish shows about plus 1.4 for white here, but if black misplays, it jumps to plus 4.4, meaning a winning position. If black tries to defend with pawn to g6, their bishop on h7 becomes useless. You calmly play queen to f3, again threatening queen takes f7 after they defend, bring in your knight to e4, threatening knight to f6 check. When they react, you switch plans with knight to d6, hitting from another angle. Now their position collapses. You're attacking the king, f7 pawn, and multiple pieces at once. After the forced trades, you unleash a devastating sequence. Knight to f7 forking the king and queen and rook, bishop takes h6, and queen takes b7 attacking the rook. Black's entire position is burning. There's no defense left. A fun detail about this position is that, surprisingly, bishop to g8 is actually not a bad defensive move for black. It does protect the f7 pawn. However, it looks so unnatural and absurd that it feels like something out of Fischer random chess. In reality, almost no opponent will seriously consider playing that. More commonly, some players will try to defend the f7 pawn with their queen, moving it to queen to c7, but that immediately runs into trouble. Here, you can simply develop your bishop to g5, attacking the queen. When black tries to block the diagonal, you unleash a strong tactical blow. Knight takes f7, simultaneously attacking the bishop on d6, the rook on h8, and threatening a deadly discovered check. Almost every opponent will instinctively recapture the knight, but then their bishop on d6 is left undefended. You capture it, and now you're a pawn up with a continuing attack. The result? You're ahead in material, controlling the board, and standing clearly better. A winning position for white.